That's exactly right, and stability for the region is key. Angus, just wanted to touch in on what's happening with inflation as well. Obviously, we know issues of food security critical to the region, but this is also translating into food price inflation, which could have damaging economic effects down the pike. Where are we seeing the worst impact of that right now?
And the year-on-year number, inflation, the last numbers were just over 13%, but the vegetable and fruit portion of that was between 30 and 40% year on year. The average citizen is really hurting. But this is going to be, as you know, it's a global problem, but those countries with lower GDP per capita will be hurt to a greater degree. And that's a concern. The World Bank is taking this seriously, is involved in trying to improve food security in many countries that are facing problems. But it's a very significant issue. Just reported that Putin said he's willing to work on taking grain from Ukraine out. That's not going to happen. Sanctions are not going to be removed. It's a war. He's strategizing. He doesn't want basically the West, obviously, to win. And he knows that he is a pretty strong card to play in terms of the supply of wheat and sunflower oil and other products. I'm concerned, frankly, at the trajectory of inflation and globally in terms of rising interest rates, because we've got a shakeout coming. As you know, in mature markets, we're likely to go into recession and increasingly seeing signs of that. Housing market's going to come off, I think, in the next few months. These are concerns for aggregate demand globally. So I think that you almost need war committees set up to look at what countries can do. You just reported on Adel Al-Jubeir becoming the climate czar for Saudi Arabia. We need to focus on that too. We forget that climate change, each year it seems to be getting worse. We've had a few months of very hot temperatures in the Indian subcontinent affecting their wheat growth at the moment. So I'm concerned at all of these. I wouldn't call it a perfect storm. It's more coagulation of economic infectation across the world, and particularly this region. Governments need to be on top of the ball more than ever before because the number of external variables of concern are rising.
And Angus, can I just get your reaction to President Putin's latest leverage pull here, saying he's willing to discuss exports, but only in exchange for sanctions relief? This is straight out of the Putin playbook, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Dan, it's not going to happen. I think Western countries won't allow it. But, of course, if there's a major crunch in the harvest in the Northern Hemisphere in the autumn, they may have to find some form of agreement. But there's a war, and that wheat, much of it is Ukrainian wheat. Some countries have turned back Russian ships carrying that grain and other ships, including Egypt. And you've had some docking in Syrian ports of that wheat. But frankly, I don't think a number of countries are in the mood to deal with Putin. It's a very strong leverage that he has. But we need to increase food security elsewhere in the world. But it's difficult. As you know, it takes time. And I think we're going to see a faster increase in the rate of inflation for food, which is very concerning globally.
Angus, just before we let you go, just to follow on to that, I mean, George Soros has essentially said at last week's Davos meeting that he believes, quote, civilization may not survive Putin's war in Ukraine. He's warned of a global depression. I got a heck of a lot of pushback on social media when I raised the question to the foreign minister of Ukraine, does the world have to pay for the fact that you guys obviously want to keep your country intact, are fighting back against Vladimir Putin, are fighting back alone? You got to wonder if the United States, in retrospect, and Europe, NATO, are not sitting back and thinking, we should have taken care of this problem when he invaded Georgia. We should have taken care of this problem when he invaded and took Crimea. The hindsight being what it is, now it's a situation where they are literally leaving the Ukrainians to do this all on their own. And as Dan said, it seems as if President Putin, again, not just on the energy front, but now on the food supply front as well, has all the leverage.
Yeah, Hadley, he is a grand strategist, having his background in the KGB and other services in Russia. This is a major concern for me, looking at finance in general, as I put my finance hat on and future hat back on in terms of finance. Risk is rising. I don't think enough countries have been clever enough geopolitically. The body politic in the West has been so self-absorbed. It's an enormous wake-up lesson for the world and the West in particular. They should have engaged with Russia before this. They should have been alert to what happened, as you mentioned, in Georgia, Crimea, Eastern Ukraine from 2014. Already there were signs, they were ignored generally, But I think that there's a wake-up call. Leaving Ukraine on own, well, it's not quite on its own because of the increasing supplies of military equipment, but there's concern if you have increased direct engagement, that could lead to other issues. And it's a game that's not easy for all of us who are in finance or the markets or anything else to try to gauge. That's where you do need a military expert. But the concern is you don't want this to conflate quickly as it could. So it's a strange game that's happening in the background that's adding to the uncertainty that we already have in the financial markets and in the global economy. And that of course, is a concern in terms of investment and general economic growth and aggregate demand. So these issues, I think, Hadley, we're going to be talking about, unfortunately, for quite a long time.